All right, so the people in the audience, if you've been in San Francisco a couple days, or if you're here, you've seen the pink mustaches riding around town in cars, pink gloves, and dropping them off. How did you start with that? Like where does the pink mustache come from? What's the idea behind it?
Yeah, the idea is we wanted to create the light in the second that you saw the Lyft. And so we thought about user experience from the perspective of not just in an app, but the actual user experience when people connect in person. And so the mustache is like a smile. Oftentimes passengers then smile, the drivers smile. And then we have the fist bump when you get in the front seat of the car. We actually staged all this out in the beginning, sat in cars, thought about different ways to do it. So we wanted to think about the user experience more broadly than traditional kind of in-app.
Right. What we really wanted to convey was that it was a peer-to-peer experience of equals. Right. So we wanted to break this idea of a service relationship. We get in the back seat and the person in the front seat is working for you, and we wanted to create one of equals.
Okay. But so does that translate to other markets? Like it's one thing to have a pink mustache riding around in cars in San Francisco, right? Because we're perfect like that. But like, how does that play in Indianapolis? Is some dude in Dallas, you're not in Dallas, but some dude in Dallas gonna feel comfortable getting into the front of the car with a pink mustache on it?
That was one of our biggest questions, when we launched our second market in LA, and then we went to Seattle and Chicago and Boston, and it's translated in every market. In every market, nobody's seen it before. And so, a Lyft driver is going down the street with a big mustache on the grill, and they feel like a celebrity when people are, stopping and pointing at it, taking pictures. It creates, this sort of, mystique around it. People start asking, what's going on, what is it? And it creates this, viral word of mouth effect, right? Drivers pass out cars when people ask them what they are. You have expanded pretty quickly recently. You started out in San Francisco, I think, for 9 months or thereabouts, and then you did another market for a few months, and then another one, and you just added 3, like right before the holiday weekend. You're at 10 now. How quickly do you plan to expand going forward?
Yeah, like you said, if we look back to last year at Disrupt, we were in one market, we were in San Francisco. Since then, we've launched 10 additional markets. We've raised $75 million from Founders Fund and Andreessen Horowitz. And even in the last 3 months, we've doubled the number of rides we're doing per week, and we've reached 1 million rides. We will continue to grow rapidly, and we want to maintain the sense of community at the same point. So we're going to be going it as fast as possible. As you saw last week, we launched 3 markets, and actually 2 weeks ago we launched 3 markets. Last week we launched another market, and we'll keep spreading this across the country and then the rest of the world.
Okay, how fast is as fast as possible? Do you have a number? Do you have a target?
You'll see as it comes. We do have a target.
You're not going to tell us? No? All right. Let's talk about the Andreessen investment. At the time that you did it, it seemed like a lot of money, right? And I talked to some people, and it kind of felt like maybe you didn't need that much at the time, that Andreessen wanted to write you a big check and scare off all the other investors that might enter the space. Is that what happened?
So it is expensive to launch each city, and so the reason we raised a large round was because we knew we were gearing up to launch a lot of cities very quickly, and that gave us the cash to do that without any concern.
And we didn't want this kind of marketplace to be about who had more money. We wanted it to be about the experience, and so for us, we wanted to take that kind of money piece off the table and be able to focus on the experience, because we think that this market will play out with who has the experience that is the most mass market, and I think you've seen different types of experiences coming from different companies.
But ultimately, it kind of comes down to who has the most money, right?
I don't think so. I think like in this space, we're all kind of not saying it, but we're talking about Uber, and we both have raised a good amount of money. We have access to more capital, And I think it comes down to experience. So we really invested in this sense of community and a real peer-to-peer experience. In the lodging industry, you have companies like Hilton that offer a professional experience, and then you have Airbnb. And I think we're closer to the Airbnb experience, and that's working well.
Okay, well, since you brought up Uber, so you caught the attention of Uber. You launched in 3 markets a few weeks ago, and then like a week later, Uber said, we're going to launch UberX, our low-cost product in those markets. And by the way, we're going to make it free for the first month. How do you compete with that? How do you compete with free?
I mean, so we thought that was a bit of a coincidence that they picked the same markets we had just launched. But it's a standard practice, in all markets for all companies in this space, to give away free rides to acquire new users. So we have a code we're doing for Disrupt, TC Disrupt. It'll get every user in San Francisco a free ride up to $20. We do this in all markets. I think both companies know that free isn't a long-term sustainable strategy, and we're differentiating based on the experience and the community around Lyft.
And we haven't seen any impact of those efforts. Our demand is growing, double digits week over week, and not something that we've needed to push any farther.
Okay, but when you see Uber raises $250 million or whatever it is, that doesn't worry you as a competitor?
No, I think we just need to double down on what we're doing and stay focused on what we're doing and not get distracted by trying to do something else. I think what we're doing in terms of community and experience and peer-to-peer and sitting up front, that's resonating. In San Francisco, Uber had been here for 3 years when we launched, or 2 to 3 years when we launched, and we're thriving here. And it's because we're offering a different experience, and I think that that'll continue to work for us.
Okay. I want to take a step back and see how you got to that experience, because you've been doing Lyft for about 1.5 years, but for 5 or 6 years before that, you had this company called Zimmer, and it was also a peer-to-peer ride marketplace, but had more long haul or corporate university trips, that type of thing. So I guess the question for the entrepreneurs in the audience, you put your heart and soul into this thing, you do it for 5 years. How do you decide to step back and say, let's do something else? Or, was it, this isn't working, or this can't grow quickly enough, or there was a better opportunity somewhere else? Like, how did that happen?
So John and I started Zimmer back in 2007, and the vision that we were always going after, so at the time I was on the board of a public transit district in Santa Barbara, and I was really frustrated with the lack of scalability of public transit. I realized that across the country, public transit systems were stagnating. There was no investments being made, the systems weren't improving, and it was because of the funding mechanisms. And so when we started Zimmer, the idea was to create this crowdsourced, infinitely scalable marketplace where people could buy access to all, get access to all of the empty seats in cars on the road. And the vision with Zimmer was always that you could step out onto the street, pull out your phone, and buy a seat in a car passing by, right? But in 2007, very few people were carrying smartphones, so it wasn't possible. So Lyft came out of a hackathon project where we were trying to figure out what does the mobile Zimmer look like. And when we were talking it over, we were actually going to call it Zimmer Instant. Luckily, we took a second and stepped back and
Change the branding.
Yeah, changed the branding. But Lyft is the ultimate incarnation that we've always been going after.
Okay, but at some point you had to flip the switch and say to all the people that have been working for you, all your employees, and say, okay, this thing that we've been doing for years, we're going to be focused on this other thing now.
Yeah, that was mentally difficult when you had to literally kind of change gears in your head. You're driving so hard at something for so long, one product, and then you had to make this gamble on a new product that you believed in, but it was a lot earlier along. So it was a tough switch, but Logan and I were pretty decisive about it. And we said, we actually launched Lyft 3 weeks after we said, let's build this. We had our first ride 3 weeks later, app built, in-app store and everything. And then I'd say about a month or two after that, after feeling the weight of trying to do two things really well, we said, let's completely focus and get 90% of the team on Lyft. So it was a tough decision, but it worked out.
At what point did you realize, at what point did you say, okay, this is working? We've caught like lightning in a bottle, let's just go forward. Because this is making us a lot of money.
Well, we had never experienced the pull that was coming from the user, the passenger in this experience. We had never experienced that with Zimmer, where it was working. We were at 150 universities and companies. We were doing thousands of rides a month after a few years, but we were seeing thousands of rides a week pretty early on, and there was the pull for more. We had to create a wait list. Remember last time around Disrupt, we had to create a wait list because there was so much demand, and we had never seen anything like that. And so it just felt like we had hit product market fit, and we wanted to continue to invest in that.
Good. I want to talk about regulation because this is something that you're going to run into in every new market. You had it in California really early on. You received a cease and desist notice from the PUC. You've been working with them. It seems like here at least you've got that worked out. Where are things with the PUC right now?
Yeah, so kind of just take a step back about regulations in general. I mean, there is a changing tide. I think you have leaders like Mayor Lee, who he declared it Lyft Day on July 13th, and has been supportive of us with the PUC. You have Eric Garcetti in Los Angeles, who's been supportive of us with the PUC. You have mayors in Indianapolis that are supportive of seeing this type of evolution of transportation. I think that the question we was getting from the PUC, we said, what are your concerns? Because literally we can't fill out the application you're asking us to fill out. We don't own vehicles. But what are your concerns? We approach them from a collaborative point of view, and they say safety. And we say, great, let's talk about safety. In fact, in California, black cars and limos aren't required to do criminal background checks. We do criminal background checks, and we have a strict criteria of what is acceptable and what isn't on the platform. Same thing for driving record checks. They do require those, but you could have a few DUIs and still pass on their driving record check, and you wouldn't be able to pass on Lyft's driving check. So same thing on insurance. We have higher insurance limits. So we said, if safety is truly the concern, let's show you everything we're doing, and you can confirm that we're doing everything we say we're doing, and then let's find a path forward.
But safety isn't always the concern, right? I mean, a lot of times I feel like the regulators are kind of in the pockets of the lobbies that they actually regulate. And so, when you look at markets like New York, possibly as an example, DC has had a pretty strong taxi lobby going against Uber for the last year or so. When you look at these markets where it's not really about safety or regulation, it's more about who has the political power. Like, how do you deal with that?
I mean, you try to shine light on it. You try to show why they're against this, and ask them a tough question, which is, why are you against this? Are you trying to protect an existing industry, or do you care about consumer choice and consumer safety? And so I think you push that question, you try to get a real answer, and then you work with your community. This community is really strong and been really helpful for us in many markets. In Los Angeles, we held a community event, had hundreds of people attend, share their stories, send emails to the politicians, and we've done that similarly in Seattle, and we'll continue to do that. So consumers have a strong voice, and often will be listened to by the politicians.
What do you say to the taxi drivers? Like, these guys are pissed, right? Because they spend all this money on, medallion and routine maintenance and stuff like that. And then you guys come in, you don't have any of this overhead costs, right? So aren't you kind of creating an unfair playing field?
So I think, the taxi industry has been around for, decades and decades, and there's been a lot of regulatory craft that is built up on it. And so when we go in and open up this discussion, part of it is shining light on these policies, and regulators are realizing that they've put unfair burdens on the existing industry. So I think it's absolutely fair, and some regulators are looking at peeling back some of those regulations that aren't helpful for the industry as a whole. But at the end of the day, I don't think it's a zero-sum game. I think taxis serve a really important market, and Lyft is serving a different new market.
And there are differences, so you need different regulatory structures. So, for example, like the first structure that California tried to put on us was for companies that own vehicles, and so that didn't work for us. These new platforms, they weren't imagined when the regulations were written decades ago, and so it also is necessary that there are separate categories.
Okay, but you guys don't think this is a zero-sum game. So you're when you think about the market opportunity, you're not just saying, there's a $30 billion cab market worldwide. We can take a share of that.
Not at all. There is the sort of for-hire transportation market in the U.S., which is roughly 11 billion. But when you look at how much people spend on transportation, it's the second highest household expense. It's about 20% of every household's budget, second only to housing. And that's the market that I think is incredibly exciting when Lyft becomes something that you can use twice a day.
Yeah, and our vision is different than kind of the for-hire category or even Uber's vision, where from the early Zimmer days, we see the opportunity as 80% of seats on our roads and highways are empty at all times. And what we're doing today with Lyft is just the first page or first chapter of what we want to do. The original vision of Zimmer and now Lyft is that you can go outside and find an empty seat in cars that are going a similar direction than you. Cars that have maybe that driver has a friend in common with you. We want to build the infrastructure, the kind of information infrastructure on top of our roads for consumer transportation. That's different than kind of competing with an existing market. That's something that hasn't been created yet.
Okay, but at some point, does that break down? Like, it's easy to do it in a city like San Francisco or Los Angeles or whatever, where there's a large enough population density. Does that work in the suburbs? Does it scale to the suburbs or to rural areas?
That was one of our big questions, and so we purposely picked LA as our second city to test that, because LA is a very suburban city, and it took longer to reach scale, right? You have lower density, so it takes longer to reach scale across a large geography like that, but it works just the same.
Okay. So I guess when you let's go back to the PUC, because we didn't really talk about what's actually happening here. Where are you with the PUC, by the way?
So the PUC has put forward a proposed decision, which would create a new category called transportation networking companies that would require safety standards, many of which were modeled after what we already do, and then that will be voted on probably in the next month or so by the Public Utilities Commissioners.
Okay, and then is the hope that you say to all the other jurisdictions that you launch in, you say, okay, well, we've got this framework in California, it seems to be working, why don't you guys adopt this? Is that sort of the plan?
I think it provides a model. Every city and state is different, but definitely provides a model that we can, and a framework that we can refer back to.
Okay. How about international? Are you guys going international anytime soon?
We'll be going international.
Yeah. Okay. How soon? Where? Okay. All right. Well, I guess that's pretty much it for us. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for listening, guys.
Thanks.
Thanks a lot.